question is, as on the order paper, Elliot Coburn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I begin wishing my Carshalton and Wallington constituents, but as one of the co-chairs of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Global LGBT Rights, everyone across the UK a very happy Pride as we approach London Pride this weekend. It's important, I think, to recognise how far we've come over the last 50 years, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady for Lanark and Hamilton East in her excellent opening remarks. I think it's very poignant that this debate actually follows the one that's just happened on Iran's nuclear weapons programme, because it does shine a light on how far we have come as a country. When there are countries still around the world today where being LGBT+ is punishable by death, we are lucky to live in a country such as the United Kingdom, which does protect our rights in law. But of course that doesn't mean that there isn't still progress to be made and things that need to be done. I have been incredibly lucky as a young openly gay man growing up in the UK. I was very, very supported by my family. My school was miles ahead of its time. Carshalton Boys Sports College had a fantastic inclusive RSC curriculum before it was mandatory. I had nothing but excellent experiences in every workplace I've been in. So I have been one of the lucky ones. But that isn't the case for every young person growing up who is LGBT+ in the UK today, and that is why Pride still matters to this day. Well, that's why it's so important to still continue shining a light on those issues, because there are still people who today think that they may be better off dead than being openly who they are. And as long as that's the case, we must continue to celebrate and continue to be visible and continue to raise these issues. Now, I attended my first... I'll be happy to give way.
I thank the co-chair of the all-party group for giving way. On this issue of people who still struggle with their sexual orientation, did he happen to see the documentary Dame Kelly Holmes has just broadcast, where she demonstrates with great heartache the problems that were caused in her life by the ban of gay people serving in the military, and the misery that that has caused her, despite all of her fantastic achievements, and how she is now striving to overcome it. And will he join me in wishing her all the best as she is now out and proud?
Yeah. I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and I will absolutely join her in congratulating Dame Kelly Holmes for her bravery. And indeed, sport is one of those areas where we do continue to see struggle, for the LGBT community. We still see homophobia, biphobia and transphobia very pertinent in sport, and that is why it's important to continue raising those issues. Now, my first Pride was back in 2012, coinciding at the time where this place was deciding whether or not two people of the same sex could get married. I didn't know anyone else who was going. It was a new experience for me, so I went along on my own, something which I really don't think I would have the confidence to do now. But it really struck me, and it really stayed with me, that experience of my first Pride, because what it pointed out to me was that, yes, I have been lucky, but I'm only lucky because of the brave people who came before me and gave up so much to fight for the rights that I am lucky to enjoy today, and lucky enough to come to this place and say I am an openly gay man and I have actually had a pretty decent life so far. So thanks to everyone who came before us. But of course, there is always more to do, and it was touched on by the Honourable Lady opposite, particularly around conversion practices. And I don't want to go over too much of the ground that I know has already been covered. The Minister was present in the debate that we led in Westminster Hall just a few weeks ago, and I don't want to repeat all of the arguments that were made there. Just to stress the point that conversion practices are still taking place in the UK today. The need to ban conversion practices isn't symbolic. It is needed to protect people from undergoing harmful practices simply because of who they are. And that surely can't be acceptable in 21st century Britain, which is why it's so important to do so, and indeed to make sure that such a ban is inclusive of gender identity as well. But I will go on to those remarks slightly later. But first of all, I do want to just pay tribute to colleagues who sadly couldn't make today's debate, but I know would have wanted to if their diary allowed, particularly the members for Redcar, Crewe and Nantwich, Darlington, Dumfriesshire, Romsey and Southampton North, Southport, Bishop Auckland and many others. I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned all of them. But I particularly want to pay tribute to the bravery of my honourable friend, the member for Bridgend, being the first ever openly trans member of Parliament. I don't want to steal their story away from them, that's for them to tell, but I just wanted to put that on the record. But that does lead me very neatly into the next point that I wanted to make, which is around the current public discourse on trans issues. Again, the Minister was present in Westminster Hall when we had a debate on the reform of the Gender Recognition Act, and I don't intend to go over the specifics of that again. But I do want to completely agree with the Honourable Lady for Hamilton and Lanark, from Lanark and Hamilton East, about the current public discourse and the toxicity of the debate that has arisen around trans issues in the UK and indeed much of the world at the moment. And I believe we have a responsibility to try and take the heat out of that discussion and try to calm things down and actually talk about the real issues, talk about what's actually needing to be... because much of the public discourse at the moment is completely nonsensical and it's driven in the most awful way. And I think that, again, the Honourable Lady opposite, I'm embarrassing her by referencing her far too often, but I think she absolutely hit the nail on the head, that much of what is said about the trans community today could almost be copied and pasted from the textbooks of history. Things that were said about openly gay men and lesbians and bisexual people in the past, particularly around the threat that they pose to the safety of women, to the safety of children, to the rights to practice religion freely. And a lot of that is completely nonsensical. And I really hope that we can, in this place, start setting more of a better example for the public discourse that we need to have on the issue and really take the heat out of it. And I think the debate that we had on reforming the Gender Recognition Act in Westminster Hall was actually a really good one. We got to the real heart of some of the issues. And I know that colleagues who serve with me on the Women and Equality Select Committee, when we did our inquiry into the Gender Recognition Act, I personally was very, very struck when we were taking evidence from those who were both in favour of reform and those who were opposed to it, how much there was actually in agreement between the two sides. Both agreed that there needed to be much better healthcare support for trans people in the UK, ranging from mental health support all the way through to more physical interventions as well. That was agreed. There was agreed that a lot of the structures that exist in terms of legislation and in terms of institutions don't work currently for either the trans community or anyone else for that matter. There was agreement that there was a lot of confusion. There was agreement that implementation of exemptions within the Equality Act of the GRA, for example, were confusing. I will absolutely give way, yeah.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and he's setting out perfectly what some of the challenges are. But does he agree with me that there's a more sinister and deep-rooted issue with misinformation and disinformation that has been funded by the religious right, part of which plays into what is happening in the US right now in terms of abortion rights and reproductive health care, and it is seeping into our society, and we must do something about that, and we must work together cross-party to challenge that misinformation and protect our trans and non-binary siblings.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Lady, and that couldn't be more true. I mean, one of the most bizarre things that seems to be invading the debate at the moment is this idea that a person will wake up on a Monday, they suddenly will decide that they are trans, and by Friday they've had invasive surgery that cannot be reversed. Of course, this simply doesn't happen. There's so much misinformation going on about what is actually happening in the UK today, and we must not allow that to permeate the debate. And I really, really hope that parliamentarians can take that lead that we need to again calm that debate down and have a discussion based on fact and based on what is actually needed to progress our country forward and make it an even better place to grow up LGBT+. So that coming back to that point, I do think it is important that when bringing forward the Conversion Practices Bill later on this year, well, I hope later on this year, that it will be trans-inclusive and the government will make the decision to do that themselves, because there is no doubt that there will be an amendment placed before the House, and I have to warn my own whips in advance. There is absolutely no way that I couldn't support such an amendment. So I think it's much more desirable to come forward from it from the beginning. I particularly want to thank my honourable friend, the member for Rutland and Melton, for her fantastic campaigning on this issue. She has been really, really quite superb. And I just really hope that we do not allow this issue to turn into a wedge issue. The idea that somehow politicising the trans debate and trying to gain electoral capital out of it is something that any political party thinks is desirable. And I would just point to any politician in this place from any political party who's thinking of doing that. We have an example of where that hasn't worked already in Australia. The Australian federal election was very heavily fought on this issue and it didn't work. So I would really advise against it. But the main point I want to make and come back to as I wrap up my remarks, I realise I've been talking for quite some time, is for me, the reason why Pride is still important and why we must still celebrate it today goes back to that point that I made earlier about the fact that some people believe that they would be better off dead than being who they truly are. But Pride is all about celebrating the fact that people can be who they are without living in fear. And I think that really is pertinent to when we're talking about the current toxic debate that is going on in the country today. Of course, you will find people who preach and say things that you find abominable or crazy. But overall, Pride for me is about everyone just getting to be able to live their lives in peace, the way they want to, not bothering anyone else, not trying to infringe on anyone else, not trying to tear down the foundation of society that, as we understand it, people just wanting to live their lives. And that is why Pride is so important to this day, because some people don't feel they can just live their lives. And for as long as that's the case, I'll continue to come here and celebrate my LGBT plus family and make sure that we in this house never forget how far we've come, but how far there is to go.